Joe Biden purportedly sending a warning to Vladimir Putin as they discuss growing tensions over Ukraine in a phone call yesterday. The U.S. urging all Americans to leave Ukraine, warning a Russian invasion could be imminent. As Ukraine's president insists, the biggest enemy right now is panic. Here to react, retired four-star general, Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane, and just the man we want to hear from at moments like this. General, considering everything you've seen and the phone call yesterday and the calls for evacuations for American citizens, what do you see happening in the next 48 hours?
Well, I mean, we've heard from our government officials and in talking to some of them myself, I mean, it's pretty evident that they certainly have come to the conclusion, based on all the indicators that they have, that a Russian invasion is now likely. They don't have evidence of a decision, but they've got lots of evidence of indicators. And what would those mean? Those are likely troop deployments, troop preparations, getting closer to assembly areas and attack positions. And we have an enormous capability to monitor what people are doing, not just to be able to see what they're doing. So we probably eavesdropped on some things and heard these preparations taking place. So I think that's kind of where we are. And in terms of what this will look like, Putin certainly has many military options available to him. I still think it's unlikely that the full-out invasion to occupy all of Ukraine would be quite a stretch for him, and that's unlikely. But a partial occupation of Ukraine, yes, and also a pressure campaign to topple the government so he can put in there a stooge government like he had before under Yanukovych. That's another likely avenue here. And when the operation begins, I think, the Pentagon and the intel service are trying to tell us that it'll likely begin with unconventional forces, a false flag operation, which would justify provoking a military invasion to stabilize the situation. And we would then likely see pre-assault fires, which would be air, missile, rocket artillery, followed up by ground attack inland on multiple courses of multiple avenues of approach, and naval infantry to take some of the southern coastal areas. That's kind of what that would look like, and it would be likely a massive cyber attack, and certainly a lot of that would be focused on Kyiv in terms of the government and shutting down the electrical grid and putting pressure on the people. So that's kind of what's in front of us. I believe, based on my sources and where Putin is in the decision-making process.
General, so many questions, and thank you for breaking that down. But it leads me to one key one. What is Vladimir Putin's goal? What would he be? I mean, I know his most likely course of action is just eastern Ukraine. The most dangerous might be attempting to take the capital itself. But what is he looking to get from these actions?
Yeah, he really wants Ukraine under his sphere of influence, and he absolutely resents. He's dealt with 3 Ukrainian governments now, and Zelensky has actually been the most aggressive in moving towards the West, and he's frustrated by that. I think it's an emotional thing for him, too, because he sees Ukraine as part of Russia. But he's got serious risks here, Pete, and when you look at them, you can see them for what they are. I think he's underestimated Zelensky. I mean, this guy has held his population together. There's no panic. There's no mass exodus. There's no hoarding of food. People are going about their lives on a regular basis. Zelensky has actually stood up to President Biden when he made that gaffe about a minor incursion and counseled Biden about stop the saber rattling. The Ukrainian people may be occupied as a result of what Putin's going to do. But, boy, they're not going to be defeated. And he's going to have to fight them for years to come. The second thing is, despite the differences we've talked about with NATO here on the show, the reality is that if he invades, he's going to unite NATO and strengthen it in a way that's exact opposite of what he wants. He wants to undermine it. But we're going to go back to a sort of a Cold War status if he takes this fledgling democracy and occupies it. And we'll have more forces on Russia's border than he ever imagined we would have as a result of it. And also, if Biden sticks to the sanctions that he's saying he's going to impose, if he does pull that trigger, the economic impact on Russia is severe. I mean, this is central banking, shutting down their participation in the dollar-driven financial system, shutting down foreign investment. And listen, he's got a retired military general who heads up their Retired Officers Association, a guy by the name of Ivashov. And he just wrote an open letter cascading Putin for criminal activity and creating an artificial conflict that doesn't exist, to cover up domestic disturbances, that you're going to create a mortal enemy with Ukraine by killing thousands of them, and Russia will become an international pariah, and the Russian people will suffer significantly, all as a result of your criminal behavior. These are his words, not mine. So, yeah, there's some headwinds ahead for Mr. Putin if he does invade.
Let's hope he does bite off more than he can chew and it blows back in his face. General Jack Keane, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great talking to you, Pete, as always.
Great talking to you.